Okay, guys, so we're going to start off where we left off. This is going to be part 2 of chapter 22, section 2. We just talked about William Howard Taft being elected president, and I'm just going to jump right into it. So, another reform that we see while Taft is president is a political reform. And basically, the way we used to have representatives in Senate is that they were basically chosen at the state level. So state officials basically said, we want this guy to be our senator. They would basically elect senators, not citizens. And one problem with that is, well, sometimes you get guys bribing these state officials just to get into office. In fact, believe it or not, today there are half of the Senate is made up of millionaires. This little picture down here kind of shows you, that picture. I have another thing here that I want to show you. The median average worth of American families is about $120,000. And your odds of being a millionaire is about 1 in every 22. The median net worth of members of Congress is $912,000. That means the odds of a congressman or woman being a millionaire is 1 in every 2. And these are the top grossing congressmen, almost $500 million all the way to $100 million. And it's very interesting, how it's still known as the Millionaires Club, even still to this day. But one thing looked to change that, and that was the 17th Amendment to our U.S. Constitution. Under the 17th Amendment, we now have a system that directly elects senators. So believe it or not, Americans now have more voice in a senatorial election than they do in a presidential election. Because remember, our presidential elections are done by the Electoral College. Okay? The Electoral College does it by each state. So a presidential nominee will win a state. The senatorial election is a direct election, meaning whoever gets more elections in a state wins. It's done by popular vote, not electoral college. This is a popular vote. Whoever wins the popular vote wins. Okay, so it's very interesting, right? Senators serve a 6-year term. Okay, our 2 senators that represent New York are Charles Schumer and Kirsten Gillibrand. I'm sorry. And again, this is a political reform. It's going to create more democracy for Americans. So Taft, the question is Taft a progressive? Well, if you look at his track record, he's going to be a trust buster just like Teddy Roosevelt. In fact, he is going to break up twice as many trusts as Teddy Roosevelt does. So how come there's no love for Taft? We're going to soon find out that Republicans, some of them don't really support Taft anymore. Some Republicans actually think Taft is not progressive enough. He should be even more progressive. And that's going to bring us into the election of 1912, where something really interesting happens. The election of 1912, Teddy Roosevelt is going to form a new political party known as the Progressive Party. And he's going to say, we need to be even more progressive than Taft is, because Taft started doing some things that some Republicans didn't like, and we'll talk about that in class. So the question is, what did Taft do that Republicans, many started to not like him, but some still did. So it's a very strange thing that happens. So nonetheless, Roosevelt creates a new political party called the Progressive Party. So in the election of 1912, you have 4 candidates. You've got Teddy Roosevelt for the Progressive Party. We've got Taft, all right, running for the Republicans. We've got this guy over here, his name is Woodrow Wilson, running for the Democrats. And again, you still got that guy Debs in that Socialist Party. People who want to bring socialism to the U.S. still running. So this is a very interesting thing that happens. Let's see what happens. This Progressive Party that Teddy Roosevelt starts, is known as the Bull Moose Party. It's going to split the Republican vote. We're going to see that in a second. So what's very interesting is that in 1908, Teddy Roosevelt endorsed Taft. Kind of said, if you want a president like me, you will vote for Taft. So he gave his endorsement. So here in 1908, here's Teddy Roosevelt. There you are, Bill, or take my endorsement. Here in 1912, Teddy Roosevelt pointing a gun at Taft saying, hey, come on, give it back. Give that back. Okay, kind of revoking it. So, again, this progressive party, this bull moose party as it's called, Teddy Roosevelt jumping in the mix. And here's the impact. Look at what happens. I love this cartoon over here. Here's Taft. Here's Roosevelt. Okay, they're fishing in the same pond, right? And these fish have numbers on them. This number says 1. So these fish represent votes. And if Roosevelt and Taft are both fishing out of the same pond, right, getting votes from the same pond, what they're actually doing is one vote's going to go to Teddy, one vote's going to go to Taft. One fish is going to go to Teddy, one fish is going to go to Taft. 1 and 1 and 1 and 1. And what it's going to do is it's going to split the votes. Take a look over here at this picture. All right? Here's the state of Ohio. All right? Notice Taft's pulling Ohio this way. Roosevelt's pulling Ohio this way. What it's going to do is it's going to split the votes in half. Right? Some people like Taft because they're Republican. Some people are going to like Teddy Roosevelt because he's even more Republican, more progressive. So it's going to split the votes. So it's very interesting that if you look at the result of the 1912 election, Woodrow Wilson, Democrat, is going to be our winner. All right? And again, what happened to the Republican vote? Well, if you look here, Teddy Roosevelt gets 27% of the vote. Taft gets 23% of the vote. 23% plus 27% would be 50%. If Teddy Roosevelt was not in the election, Taft probably would have got 50% of the vote, and he would have won. But look what happened. The vote got split between Taft and Roosevelt. And as a result, look who's got 41% of the vote. Woodrow Wilson is going to win. So if you look at the map, notice it was hard for either Taft or Roosevelt to win any state because they kept splitting the votes. And it's an electoral college process. And we talked about this with the election that we just had. Okay, Woodrow Wilson ends up winning huge because, again, Taft and Wilson are going to split those votes. So we have a new president, Woodrow Wilson. He is going to be our third progressive president in a row. Believe it or not, even though he was part of the Democratic Party, which was an opposite party, he is also going to be a trust buster. He's going to say, I agree, we have to crack up these busts. He's going to do a lot for workers and business owners. We're going to talk about that in a second. And under Woodrow Wilson, something in his past called the Clayton Antitrust Act. It's similar to that thing called the Sherman Antitrust Act. Okay, but it's going to be a little bit different. So again, Woodrow Wilson going to continue progressive reforms just like those other two guys. So here's Woodrow Wilson, very famous president, all right, throwing out the first pitch at the World Series. I'm just showing this so you guys know who this guy is. So under that Clayton Antitrust Act, 1914, it sets up new rules for trusts and monopolies. It's going to basically reiterate that you cannot buy stock if you're a company in the same industry. Okay, it's going to give the government more power. A trust that got broken up recently using under the clause of this Clayton Antitrust Act, believe it or not, was Microsoft. Okay, before Apple hit it big the last couple years, Microsoft used to be everywhere. It was basically you had a Windows computer or you had nothing, and Windows was on everything. Okay, and they controlled everything, and the government basically said, you have control of the entire market. You can't do that. Okay, and they actually cited the Clayton Antitrust Act in breaking up Microsoft a couple years ago. So it's kind of interesting that it comes back to today. Also, the Clayton Antitrust Act is going to specifically talk about workers' unions and workers' rights. And basically it says this. It says you can't force workers to end strikes as long as they are doing it peacefully. It's also going to make it legal to do things like picket and boycott, and strikes in general are now legalizing it, meaning as long as it's peaceful, it's 100% legal. The Clayton Antitrust Act is going to legalize those matters. Also under Woodrow Wilson, the Federal Reserve Act is passed, so the Federal Reserve banking system. And what this does is it improves the way our banking system works. The Federal Reserve is going to basically control all of the money in America. Okay, it's going to monitor the money. It's going to control things called interest rates. Okay, and then how does it do that? Well, there are 12 Federal Reserve districts. All right, if you ever see a dollar bill, they have these letters on them, and it'll say Federal Reserve Bank of Kansas City, right? And I wonder if you guys ever wondered why those Federal Reserve banks had letters. Well, the letters stand for the district number that they come from. So the first letter in the alphabet is A. So if this Federal Reserve note was minted in Boston, it would be it would have an A in it. If it was mint in 2 is B, right? So any New York Federal Reserve note that was minted will have a B on it, right? C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, L. So those are the only letters that are noted on dollar bills. So if you're wondering where those all came from, right, that's where it comes from. All right, this is the Federal Reserve in Manhattan. All right, I'm going to show you guys a video in class of what the Federal Reserve does. It's a little confusing, okay, but basically they control interest rates and print money and things like that. Finally, under Woodrow Wilson's guise, the 18th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution, okay, was passed. It is called the Prohibition Amendment or the Temperance Movement. It prohibits, right? It's called prohibition. It prohibits the production, the sale, and the consumption of alcohol, which means you can't make alcohol, you can't sell alcohol, and you can't drink alcohol. And again, this was a social reform, right? It's a social reform because some people blamed poverty, violence, and unemployment on alcohol. Well, how so? Well, they said because people, men in particular, are drinking so much, they're spending all their money on alcohol, and they're not bringing money home for their families. And when they do get home to their families, they're violent because they're drunk. And it's basically, it's leading to unemployment issues. And here you see, right, the U.S. is voted dry. Dry meaning alcohol is not allowed. Okay, so again, the 18th Amendment was passed in 1918. It was ratified in 1919. So it's easy to remember, right? Think about it. 1918, the 18th Amendment was passed. What used to be the drinking age in the U.S.? It used to be 18. Get it? What's the drinking age now? The drinking age is 21. Well, guess what the 21st Amendment to the Constitution, guess what the 21st Amendment to the Constitution does? It ratifies the 18th Amendment. We're not going to get into that yet, all right? For right now, Woodrow Wilson's president, all right, and the prohibition is enacted. You cannot sell, make, or drink alcohol in the U.S. And here's a little picture. Lips that touch liquor shall not touch ours. Ooh, these guys are serious. Watch out. So one last thing to talk about. Yes, this is the progressive era, and we're progressing moving forward. But what about those Jim Crow laws? What about those discriminatory laws down south? Why can't we progress or fix or reform those? Well, believe it or not, all three of these progressive presidents don't touch any of those Jim Crow laws down in the south. The question is, why not? And we're going to talk about that question in class. So yes, we're progressing. This is the progressive era. But what about these laws down south that are discriminatory, that are segregation laws? What about all this stuff? How come that's not progressing during this era? We'll talk about that in class. All right, guys, that's all I have for you guys. Do your homework. I hope you enjoyed this video, and we'll check you out next time. I think that stopped. I think it stopped. I'm not sure.